Okay, so section 4, are there any questions in particular that you guys got tripped up on?
Like which ones we got wrong?
Yeah, I mean, or ones that you were just, you got wrong, but you were really confused by. I mean, I can just start with like probably number 4, but if anybody, wants to start with a different one. 4 is good? Okay. So this says no longer considered blank. The belief that all of Puerto Rico's indigenous Taino people perished centuries ago appears to be a blank now that modern Taino descendants have come forward. So they're kind of saying, right, that, this was, this belief is like no longer, true because now there are modern Taino descendants, right? So like that says like conclusive in reality. Well, it's not going to be that this belief is a reality, right? Because it was actually like disproven because real modern Taino descendants came forward. And what are other choices that people chose? Or I can just go through all of them. Um, and was like, did anybody pick D maybe and
Yeah,
think
D.
like, yeah, okay. So I mean, no longer considered erroneous. So like, kind of like irrelevant. The belief that all of Puerto Rico's indigenous Taino people, that appears to be a delusion. So delusion does work, but erroneous. I mean, the belief is not necessarily erroneous or like, irrelevant or weird. The belief is more just like now brought into question. So that's why B is the right answer because it's no longer considered tenable. Like a tenable theory is something that's like not really, it's very, proven true and everything, so it's not really open to question. Yep. So I mean, does that make sense to everybody? And then misconception obviously works too because the belief is now a misconception. Now it appears to be a misconception. Number 5 is pretty much totally vocab. Like, if you know the words, you'll get it. So like as we go through and kind of the like more, as we get to the harder ones, some of them will be hard because they're like really, like they have, the words aren't the problem. Like, it's mainly just trying to figure out like what exactly goes in the blanks. And it's hard to figure that out. But then others, it's like it's easy to figure out what like type of word should go in the blank, but it's hard to like remember the word definitions. So I mean, although easily angered, this is number 5. Although easily angered by our mischievous behavior, our mother could be immediately blank by our expressions of remorse. So I mean, you can kind of think, okay, well, she's immediately kind of like, like she's not angry anymore, right? Like she feels like less angry at them because they're like they're they feel remorse and they're apologizing and stuff. But I mean, when you look at all the words, you might not know what like mollified means, and that's the right answer. Kind of like anger going away. What about 6, 7, and 8? Okay. So although aging brings about profound physiological changes, it does not alter an individual's blank. An irascible 30-year-old will probably still be blank at 70. So I mean, so what did you pick for that? Okay. So, and it does not alter an individual's personality. So personality does work, but then they say, an irascible 30-year-old will probably still be laconic is the second blank there in D at 70. So in laconic means sort of like brief, um, not many words, kind of quiet. So I mean that doesn't really fit because irascible is more like talking about like bad temper or just kind of like an irritable person. So I mean, we're looking more, so if we look at the first blank, and that's a good strategy to kind of look at the first blank or, or the second blank, just look at one blank and then kind of eliminate some. But then we know like anatomy and probably outlook and then stature are out, right? Because we're more talking about like personality or disposition. But again, laconic doesn't really fit there. So cantankerous does fit. Yep. And again, what?
What is cantankerous?
So cantankerous is kind of the same as irascible, like just kind of very like
Grumpy, right?
unpleasant
Kind of.
person. Yeah,
Yeah.
very grumpy. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I mean we might. I don't know. Would you guys want to do at some point during like not this class, but during one of the classes like some sort of vocab review? It seems
Yeah, I think
like
that'd be a good
yeah. I mean
idea.
it seems like some of you and the vocab won't only like hit you in like these completing the sentences. Like I don't know if you guys noticed, but like now as we go to the short passages in the same section, like number 10, it's like, the tone of this, passage, the first sentence of this, passage too, and it's like wistful, dismayed, emphatic, ambivalent, apologetic. So you probably know some of those words, but you probably don't know others. So I mean, the vocab will even help you get some of the reading questions right as well. Um, okay, so I mean, do you feel like you want to go over any of these
What
other
was the
completeness?
answer to 6?
Number six.
Yeah.
Number six was A.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna pick that first, but I know that term is associated with like things in the water usually,
Mm-hmm.
like floats them around the boat or something. So I was like, I didn't think
Mm-hmm.
that applied to space, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just that it's more, it's a little more like
Right,
metaphorically
right, right.
using
You can
it.
use it. Yeah, you can use
Yeah.
it with a lot of stuff.
Okay,
It's
great.
probably a stretch to use it there, though, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but I
Right.
mean, I've seen words, again, you're picking the best answer. So,
Yeah.
even though it's a little bit of a stretch, it's better than all the other answers there. Okay, so let's go on to the two short passages. Unless, did everybody feel okay and just want to move to the long passage? Or,
I was fine with the short passage.
okay, everybody pretty good? Okay, so let's move on to the long passage. This is a very, you get these types of passages sometimes. They're very like psychedelic, right? They're like very, and actually we'll encounter one later in the semester, but like, kind of very, abstract and sort of like personifying this map and stuff, and very kind of, I don't know, 60s psychedelic sort of thing. Okay. So basically, so I mean, I'm sure everybody got the first couple questions right, but I mean, we can start with number like um, well, actually, let's start with 13 just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So, I mean, the like they're saying in lines 1 to 5, so at the very beginning when they're talking about the map unrolling, they're saying it unrolled north. The map is described as if it were what? I mean, it's not going to be invaluable, right? Because that would mean that
Yeah, a
just doesn't
map
make
unrolling
sense.
doesn't mean something
Yeah,
valuable.
I mean, cryptic.
It's like foreboding.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't really work. I mean, yeah, like foreboding, that doesn't really make sense. Antiquated, I mean, not really. That doesn't, I mean, it might be an
Yeah, it might be
antiquated
wrong.
map, but that doesn't mean that it's
If
going
it
to
said it's
unroll.
like started cracking or something, or like
Right, right.
flaking
Or,
or something
and
like
it
that.
did say at some part that like it was kind of faded a little bit. So maybe if it had like, quoted that, then maybe that would be a good answer, but no. And then erroneous. There's that word again. I think we encountered that like a couple questions ago. Um, Basically like irrelevant and like weird. So I mean, basically, what we have left is animate, right? And I mean, basically that makes sense because
It's
it's,
like alive.
yeah, it's like they're saying it's like an, they're saying it's alive, like, oh, he unrolled the map. They're saying it unrolled. So I mean, they're actually saying like it's unrolling itself. All right, so let's look at number 14. I watched, so I mean, number 14 is 9 through 14. I watched the hand rather than the location, for it seemed to have the power over the terrain. And when it stopped for Lewis's voice to explain something, it was though all streams everywhere quit running, hanging silently where they were to let the point be made. This is kind of weird. Like the answers are like very like vague, right? They're like they're not talking about specifics. They're like, oh, recount an
Yeah, I
anecdote
had to
or
think a
offer an
lot about this
example.
one.
Yeah, so I mean, this is really really a weird question.
Although I feel
Um,
like you could eliminate A, D, and E really quickly because they just seem totally irrelevant to what it's
yeah, I
talking
mean,
about.
D and E like make
Yeah, D and
prediction,
E,
advance,
they
and
don't make,
theory.
yeah, it doesn't
Those are
make any
definitely. I
sense.
mean, I feel like A is a little closer just because like an anecdote is kind of like a short. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really
Right.
fit, but I mean, it's a lot closer than D and E because an
Yeah.
anecdote is like a little story that you're retelling. So, I mean, then maybe he's sort of retelling a little story about like the hand, but it's still kind of weird. Offer an example. What do you think of that?
It's a possibility.
Yeah, again, it's like a possibility, but I mean, offer an
Yeah.
example of the
Of what,
hand.
kind of,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, of the hand. I mean, it's kind of weird. Okay, so note and impression is the answer, and I mean that makes the most sense. Again, none of these answers are like super jump out at you and are like, oh wow, this is clearly a better answer. But I mean, it does, it is the best answer of them because it's kind of, talking about the impression, that he's like looking at the hand. He's like, wow, it's like, the streams stop and everything, and he's like watching in awe. So it is like an impression. So there, let's go to 15, and it actually talks about the exact same sentence. And a lot of times it happens, by the way, in critical reading that there will be like two questions or even three questions on like the same part or like
Hmm.
the same cluster of
Right.
sentences. Yeah. So, because actually 16 also refers to that. So, okay, so let's look at 15. The narrator suggests that Lewis's hand is what? This one's a little bit of an easier question, but
Yeah.
again, if you don't know vocab, this is going to be a hard question.
I put D.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the answer. Yeah, and I mean basically, again, this kind of really
You have to know what it means.
you have to
Right.
know what the words mean. So I think so. Next time we will do like a vocab session. But I mean, yeah, I mean, deft means kind of like nimble, and languid means like kind of just like slow moving, and resilient is kind of resistant. So yeah, I mean I mean if you know the vocab, this is a really easy question. But if you don't, then
I mean,
it's kind of
expressive sort of makes sense, but
yeah,
not
expressive
really
sort
though.
of makes sense, except
Yeah, but they're talking about how the streams and everything stop.
right,
It makes
Right.
it seem like the
right.
hand is a god.
Right.
Right, like
Yeah, so that
he's
makes more
saying, yeah, he's
sense.
saying the hand, he just moves it, and it seems like the stream stops. So exactly, so it's more like all powerful than
Right.
expressive. Okay, so then 16, that's hanging most nearly means.
Suspended.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's pretty clear. Again, with these kinds of questions, you always want to refer back to the passage and like make sure that because they'll really trick you. I mean, I've seen like this kind of question pretty much runs the whole gamut. It's like, well, sometimes it's just like hanging, and that means like suspended, and it's like super literal and it's super straightforward, and you could answer that question like without like looking at the passage. Other times, though, it is really, really like tough, and they use it in a really weird way, and you have to like go back and really look, but there will be like the normal definition sitting there, and you'll be tempted to do that, but instead no, you have to look back and really make sure. Okay, good. So I mean, and we can keep going through this, but I mean, did anyone have particular like questions that they were really hung up on?
Well, I didn't get 23 right, but I think that's just vocab because I didn't know what
Oh,
didactic means,
okay,
and that was the
sure.
answer.
Sure. Yeah, so with that one, didactic means like, inclined to instruct and teach. So I mean, he's kind of saying, oh, well, he was expecting the main guy, he's going to turn this into something, I thought, a lesson, a moral, a life principle, a way, way, capital, like, basically is saying, he thought that he was going to teach some sort of lesson, like Lewis was going to teach some sort of lesson, but then instead, like, then he just did something else. I mean,
So like, does
someone
didactic mean like instructive kind of?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, sorry, I said that, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, exactly. It means instructive, basically. And you might almost be inclined to pick whimsical, just because it
That's what I
seems,
did pick
yeah, just because it
because
seems like
I
he's
didn't know what didactic meant. So out of all the other answers,
right,
whimsical made the
and it
most
seems
sense.
like he's
But
saying, well, he expected them to, he expected Lewis to teach him like a lesson, but then all of a sudden he doesn't. So it
right,
seems almost like he's whimsical, but that's not quite as good as
right,
the
it's
main
not that's
idea,
not
which
really
is
accurate.
instructive. Yeah. I'm just looking if there are any others. Let's go over 19 because that's pretty. That's a pretty difficult question. So did you understand kind of what they were saying here in this cluster? Like, this whole valley will be underwater, but right now it's wild, and I mean wild. It looks something up in Alaska. We really ought to go up there before the real estate people get hold of it and make it over into one of their heavens.
So they're saying it's like it's wild. It's
Yeah,
not
I mean,
populated by people. It's
they're saying
very
it's
nature.
desolate and like wild
Yeah.
and perhaps beautiful and stuff. But they're saying the real estate people are going to get hold of it and change it, right? So I mean, and then they use the word heavens. So I mean, do you think he's using heavens like sincerely? Like he's saying, oh, they are going to turn it into a heaven?
No.
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 Or
Yeah.
sarcastic, yeah.
Yeah, so he's being pretty sarcastic. So I mean, the answer is E, ironic. So he's just, again, like, if sarcastic were on here, that would be, a
That'd be probably
wonderful
even
answer
better.
too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would even be better. But because nothing else fits that,
Right.
like the closest other than ironic is deceitful. So I mean, that doesn't really make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not trying to deceive. He's being sarcastic or like maybe ironic. Okay, so let's look at maybe 20, and then we'll maybe move on to the next section. So I mean, here this is talking about, so right after they say, okay, the real estate people are going to get a hold of it and make it into one of their heavens, then he says, I leaned forward and concentrated down into the invisible shape he had drawn, trying to see the changes that would come. The nighttime rising of dammed water, bringing in a new lake up with its choice lots, its marinas and beer cans. So he's kind of just like imagining like, kind of this whole new world like coming forward because of the stuff that the real estate people do. So what do you think? When he's talking about all of this in lines 25 to 30, how do you think the narrator's reacting? What is he doing?
He's imagining two radically different.
Yeah. So if most people got that, I guess. B. Okay, good. So he's imagining two different worlds. Okay, great. So are there any other questions that people? Because this is a hard question, 20, but I don't know. I guess you guys, it's a level 3. You've seen the sheet, by the way. Like, it's in the back because it looks like maybe you didn't grade it, Tommy, or did
Oh,
you?
this?
Yeah.
I graded my thing, but I did it in the actual book over here.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure. Okay, yeah. So yeah. So basically, this also tells you the difficulty. So, it seems like you guys are pretty good with most of the difficulty 3 questions, but then some of the 4 questions you're a little shaky on. Okay, good. Anyone's on the next page? I know there are 2 here, but they're both pretty easy. But you guys are probably both good with 24, and 25. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to section 7. And that's on page 475. Okay, so let's look at number 3. The professor's presentation was both blank and blank. Though brief, it was instructive.
I had trouble with this one.
Okay. So whenever, this is a kind of common format for the double blank, like complete the sentences. And basically it'll be like, say something like something was both blank, and they'll say, it'll actually after that have a description of what those like things should be. Like it'll be like, just use like a synonym for blank 1 and then a synonym for blank 2 and kind of describe. So that's your key. So we're looking for something where the first blank means brief and the second blank means instructive.
So I eliminated A, C, and E. Right away,
Yeah, so
because I
yeah.
didn't see those matching up with brief or instructive.
Right. So basically, so you said A, C, and E, right?
A, C, and E,
Yeah. Yeah. So exactly. I'm looking at the first blank, verbose or comprehensive. So in provocative, we're really down to concise and succinct, right? Because both of those mean brief.
What does verbose mean again?
That means like a lot of words, kind of
Okay.
the opposite of
Got it.
like brief. Yep.
Right.
So now we're just looking at like B and D, and we're looking at the, the like second blank. So elaborate or enlightening.
Well, if it's instructive, it has to be enlightening.
Yeah, if it's instructive, it has to be enlightening. If it were elaborate, that kind of means
It would be hard to make something that's
wouldn't.
elaborate so brief too.
Yeah, that's true too. Elaborate is almost like it, opposite
Right.
meaning of brief. So that
More
wouldn't really
complicated.
quite. Yeah, exactly. So it wouldn't really quite fit. And then also, we're looking more for something that really means like instructive. Did anyone have trouble with 4 or 5? And 5 is
I
just a
got 5
vocab.
wrong.
Yeah, so 5 is just a vocab thing. The judges published their opinions, though sophisticated and subtle, were undeniably blank. They left no doubt of her intentions. So something, again, this is kind of giving the definition of the word we're looking for after the blank. So we're kind of looking for something that means no doubt of her intentions. And unequivocal means that, like, if you're equivocal, you're kind of waffling and like on the fence, but unequivocal just means like saying something one way and meaning it that way. Did anyone have trouble with 4? Because that's kind of a hard question. Was everyone okay? You're okay with 4? Okay. Okay, so let's look at 4. With its large circulation, Essence Magazine has enjoyed blank, only recently challenged by new publications aggressively seeking female African American readers. So it's hard to kind of see what they're like. Again, they don't really like put any sort of like 3 and 5 really kind of put a definition of what the words are going to be, but 4 doesn't. But right away we don't.
You can get rid of A and B right away. Like,
Yeah,
I can get rid of B and D right away.
Because it says it's enjoyed.
With the both of you, we get the right answer.
An aggregation's a fight, so I don't think they enjoyed a fight.
Yes,
they enjoyed this argument.
Right. So aggregation is out. Prognosis, again, like that's more used in the medical.
Mean?
That's more used in the medical field, where like you say, oh well, someone has cancer, and oh, well, their prognosis is not good. Like, so I don't. Again, that's kind of like we were saying about flotsam, right? Like, it doesn't it's really more related to water, but it's using here metaphorically. But I mean, not metaphorically, but it's kind of a stretch. But I mean, here I think this would be a pretty big stretch again. But I mean, we could leave it there, I guess, and not immediately eliminate it. But it seems like it's not going to be right. So in inclination, it doesn't really seem like an inclination or a retrenchment. So preeminence, basically that means like it was the foremost like magazine for African American women. I actually think this question is missing a comma. That's what kind of like no, like I mean, I guess it's technically right, but I think it would be clearer like,
Yeah, I know what you
with
mean.
its large circulation, Essence magazine has enjoyed a
Or a
preeminence, comma,
semicolon. Yeah.
yeah, it could. No, I mean, you don't really want a semicolon there. Um,
Oh yeah, comma
because
would probably
only
work better
recently
because
challenged. It's not really like
right,
a
right, because it
complete
links
sentence.
better.
But I mean, it's kind of weird how they don't have a comma there. But
Right.
technically it's okay. But it would be the meaning would be a lot more clear if there were a comma there. So okay. But yeah, so basically it was like the foremost magazine. Okay, so let's move on to the next section. So did anyone have problems with like these two short passages? No, everyone good? Okay. Um,
No,
Number 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just going to bring that up. Number 9 again is a vocab heavy question, right? So they're saying, cool does not like, it hasn't really gone out of, style like these other slang words have. So I mean, then they mention fashion designs as showing something that, also goes out of style. So I mean, again, if you don't know these words, this is going to be kind of hard to answer. But the answer is ephemeral. Like, ephemeral means like not permanent or long lasting. Like it means short lived. Um, so I mean, that's the right answer. But again, if you don't know like esoteric, then esoteric is just kind of like obscure, like an obscure little fact or something. But yes, I mean, if you don't know the words, then you're gonna have trouble answering number 9. I mean, but did you know the words maybe or?
no.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah, I was
yeah.
able to eliminate provocative, pretentious, and exotic. And I
Good.
just guessed between the two.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, you can probably pretty much, yeah, I mean, if you know, pretty much everyone knows those 3. So, I mean, you could pretty much eliminate those. Okay, good. So let's look at this next, long passage now. So, let's look at number 10. So that's just the very first one. So did you feel like you got the main idea of this, of this passage?
Well, I picked it wrong. I said B, but looking back, it makes a lot of sense that it's E.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I mean, basically, yeah, I mean, basically, like, they're talking all about, like, Venus and this and that, and yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of these could be right. Like, criticize the lack of research on a topic of mystery. Well, I mean, he does at one point say, like, well, there were these two different opinions. They thought, Venus had like a lot of water, and then they, thought that it was like a prehistoric Earth. So I mean, maybe he could be criticizing, like what people said back then. But I mean, to criticize the lack of research on a topic of mystery, like that's really specific. Like lack of research and topic of mystery. So we can eliminate A. B, speculate about life on another world. I mean, if we had just taken like paragraph 3 out and isolated that, and all these questions were about paragraph 3, that choice would be correct. But that paragraph 3, talking about how maybe it had a big sea, or maybe there were giant dragonflies and stuff. That's only part of this huge passage. So yeah, so I mean, basically, that's out. Lament the demise of a compelling theory. I mean, if he had said, "Oh, it's really sad that like there aren't giant dragonflies like roaming around Earth and stuff, roaming around Venus and stuff," then that makes sense. But that is not what we're going for. Illustrate, and again, also, do you get the like one thing I want to start doing is just like quizzing you on like what do you think the tone was, because tone will actually help you a lot in answering these questions, because they'll give you a really good sense of like just kind of, even if you don't know the main idea, if you know the tone, you can kind of like get at the main
I feel like
idea.
he's just trying to kind of just tell people things. Like I think he's just trying to be
It's like
instructive.
Right.
discussing
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Essence with E.
it's just like informational, right? It's
Right.
like something you might read in like, Scientific American, or like, almost not really encyclopedia, I guess, but it's got an informational, it's like an article
Yeah.
sort of. So I mean,
Yeah.
Well, it says it's from a book about astronomy.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I mean,
Right.
yeah. So I mean, you can use that to your benefit as well. Like these little blurbs on top. And I mean, like for lately, like when I took the SAT and stuff, it didn't seem like they were very helpful. But it seems like they're like in number 4. The little blurb says, it's excerpted from a novel published in 1970, and they're, 4 men looking at a map in preparation for a canoe trip.
Yeah.
If you didn't read that,
Yeah, I forgot to read that, and I was like, what is this even talking
yeah,
about?
so I mean, so sometimes they're super helpful. Like, if you didn't read this, you'd be like, "What is this?" Like, it unrolled slowly, and then there's this big hand like pointing at stuff. You'd be like,
Right.
"What is going on?" But now you see it's a map. So I mean, yeah. So you can look. Okay, it's a book about astronomy. So I mean, and so you get a general sense of the tone. It's like an article and informational. So again, like C, lament is not right. So yeah, I mean, illustrate the principles of planetary research. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's really about Venus. It's not more broad than that. So then E, discuss attempts to understand the astronomical enigma. And I mean, it is kind of an enigma. Like some of you might have gotten caught up on that word. Like maybe it is an enigma, maybe it's not. But and they really are saying it's enigma because they're saying Venus is almost equal to Earth, and its gravitational field is very similar, and it's pretty close to Earth, so it's not too far or close to the sun, and so they're kind of saying, well, it should kind of have an environment that's like good for like plants and animals and whatever to start growing, but it really doesn't. So I mean that's why they're saying that it's an astronomical enigma. Okay. So what about 11 or 12? Anybody have trouble with that? What about, I mean, let's just go to 11. So they're saying 11 to 14, in size and mass, Venus is almost equal to Earth, and its gravitational field is only slightly weaker than ours, so that logically it might be expected to have the same kind of atmosphere. But this is emphatically not so.
So that's
Yeah, so I mean that's A. Dismiss a plausible supposition. So it's kind of saying, well, this is plausible that it would be similar to Earth, but it's not so. It's not mocking, or it's not bolstering or supporting the accepted opinion. Yeah, so I mean it's not undermine a controversial hypothesis. That's if it's just said undermine a hypothesis, that might be true because maybe the hypothesis is kind of like the fact that like Venus and Earth are very similar, but since it's saying a controversial hypothesis, that's not. I mean, they're not really saying this is controversial. They're not really saying the hypothesis that like Venus and Earth
Right.
are similar. They're not saying that's controversial. So, yep. The primary purpose of the third paragraph, lines 22 to 31, is to. So, I mean, that's just one theory: the clouds contained a great deal of water, and then produce seas of soda water. Another intriguing theory was basically there are marshes and giant dragonflies and everything.
so it's
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, they're just presenting two theories about Venus. And I mean, again, you might be tempted to pick B, challenge two popular misconceptions about Venus. But I mean, he's not challenging them in this paragraph. Like he's not saying, well, there was one theory, about like seas of soda water, and that's wrong because,
Yeah, he never really proved them wrong.
yeah, I mean, he later
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
later he
later,
proves them
yes.
wrong, but in this paragraph, he's just presenting the two theories. Yep.
I put C.
Okay, you put C. Show why a particular hypothesis was misguided. Yeah, so again, that's wrong for the same reason that like, it's presenting these ideas, but it's not striking them out yet. It's not saying, oh, they're wrong because of this. Yeah, I mean, they say that later how, the temperature is so high and, the atmosphere is pure carbon dioxide, but they don't say that in this paragraph. This paragraph, they're just kind of, presenting and describing these theories. Okay. Okay, so in order for the hypothesis in lines 28 to 30, there would, so let's go to 28 to 30. That would be, there would be marshes, luxuriant vegetation of the fern and horsetail variety, and primitive life forms such as giant dragonflies. Which statement could not be true of the conditions on Venus?
I thought this was more of a science question.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I mean, and occasionally they do have something. They have every so often with these passages, sort of like a logical deduction, or it's something that draws a little bit on outside knowledge. I found. I mean, technically, you can answer all the
If you
questions.
read through the paragraph pretty closely, it's not hard to answer.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's true, but I mean, it is good to recognize that there are some questions like this. And I mean, I just was tutoring someone for for like in ACT prep, and there was this passage about the Chinese zodiac, and then one of the questions was like, which of the following is not like like a year of the tiger or something. So like you
How
actually
are you
is.
supposed to know that? Yeah.
So I mean, in the passage they told you like how it repeats and when it starts and stuff, but still like that's a little more like computation and
Becca,
thinking
you might
rather
know
than
that.
actually like so I mean so they do sometimes the SAT or the ACT do hit you with the questions a little bit like less looking back at the passage and pointing to something and more just like common sense or like kind of drawing on prior knowledge, but I mean they're rare, but so for this one yeah, like creatures are able to fly with ease. Well, that's good, right? I mean, I mean that's really weird. That's a really weird answer, but I mean, yeah, I mean, like if we want dragonflies to, if we want our giant dragonflies to be there, then they need to be able to fly with ease. Enough light for photosynthesis
Right.
to occur.
The way I got rid of that answer is like, can they fly with ease if the atmosphere is carbon dioxide like it said it was?
Yeah.
Choking the whole time.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so then yeah, we would want enough light for photosynthesis to occur. We would want evolutionary change to occur, and we would want a generally warm and humid atmosphere. So, I mean, we don't want pure carbon dioxide because life can't. Yeah, so I mean, okay, great. So, let's go over 14. So the statement in lines 32 to 34. So that's going to be in 1962, the American probe Mariner 2 bypassed Venus at less than 22,000 miles and gave us our first reliable information. The surface, proved very hot indeed. We now know it's really hot. Okay. So, what does this suggest?
Suggesting the evidence that the earlier was
That's B. Yep. Yeah, because it's basically saying,
for the first time they have
right.
information.
For the first time they have reliable information. So I mean that's so that's really did anyone get tripped up on the fact that like right after they say we now know that the maximum temperature is almost 500 degrees Celsius, because like the time they don't make the time scale clear there, sort of like I mean I guess we know this book was written in 1995, but like it's a little weird how they're saying, okay, it bypassed Venus and it gave us our first reliable information, but it didn't say like the Mariner 2's information told us that the surface is 500 degrees Celsius. Like we now know, so it's a little weird, but I don't know.
I was surprised that on 14 the answer wasn't D.
Okay.
That was something that was.
Sure. Okay, so
Because
that's
if you read
right.
it seems like that would make perfect sense.
yeah, so that's close. That probe allowed that like the Mariner allowed scientists to formulate a completely new theory. I mean,
Maybe it's not a new theory, or was it?
Well, it
no,
might have
I mean
been
it
a new
is a
theory.
mostly new theory. Yeah.
Yeah, but it said 334, which just ends up information.
Yeah,
So
and
I know
that's
you're supposed to read around the quote.
no, people emphasize too much reading around. I mean, if when they refer to a line, look at the line. Like,
Right.
you might just want to look a little bit around to get like contextual clues. But I mean, some people teach the strategy like cover up the line that is referred to and just read around like and try to answer it, because then that'll like help you get like the main idea or like the where they're going with this. But don't do that. That's not
I guess what the problem is with that is that they don't say anything about the new theory in those lines. They just talk
Yeah,
about
I
the
mean, again,
Right.
like, don't, I mean, like, someone who thinks too hard about the question, and I mean, I'm prone to doing that and stuff, might pick, like, D or, another answer just because, like, getting caught up on kind of these next sentences saying, now we know it's 500 degrees Celsius and we know all these different things and, oh, they are making a new theory. But just looking at that one sentence, it is saying that, it's just saying, okay, we got our first reliable information. So yeah, so again, look around for context, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about that sentence, and definitely don't not look at that sentence. So, okay, did everyone get 15 right? Maybe that was
What was the
Um,
answer? I didn't check.
oh, okay, so that was D. That,
Yeah, I
you
got
know,
that right.
he's decisive when he's saying, you know, the answer is that, you know, it's Venus is closer to the sun. I mean,
I
okay.
think all the ones in this one, the other one is really easy to eliminate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this passage is fairly straightforward, except for like, you know, maybe number 10 and maybe number 14 are a little weird, but generally this is a pretty straightforward passage. So let's look at this one now. And I think this one is a more challenging passage, actually. I do, you know, on average, do you guys feel more kind of like
Yeah, this was an
uneasy?
annoying passage. I didn't like this
Yeah,
passage
do
at
you
all.
feel more uneasy with the kind of like cultural narratives than like the science passages or the like, you know, kind of history? Yeah, because I mean, I feel that way. I don't know if others do,
These
but
Yeah.
like,
all seem more abstract.
yeah, like sometimes they'll have like a, you know, just a random narrative about like a map, and then sometimes they'll have like a science passage, and then sometimes they'll even have, you know, some sort of like political thing. But pretty much on every SAT, you will see some. It's very specific type. It's you know, cross cultural. It's like, okay, you know, someone who's either moving to America from a different country or is like mixed race or something. It's like their narrative and like their cultural you know, narrative. And I don't know, for some reason I just find those pretty hard to follow, but because they usually tend to be pretty abstract and deal with kind of abstract ideas and stuff, and you know, and tend to also be kind of, you know, flowery sometimes, like talking about, you know, you know, the what is it, the raindrops like bouncing off the sidewalks and stuff,
Mhm.
like, and
Yeah.
being very, you know, artful. So so yeah, I mean, I usually, I don't know why, and it might just also be they pick, you know, these to be harder, but these usually tend to be the most difficult passages, the ones that are like the cross-cultural ones. Okay, so let's look at number 16 actually. Let's just start with the first one. So they're saying, you know, used to like, you know, the curves of Puerto Rico, you know, now she has to like adjust to the, you know, the regular aggressive two-dimensionality of Brooklyn.
D, right?
Um, Yes,
C.
it's
It's
well,
unvarying, right?
yeah, let me just check. Yeah, it's C. Yep. So I mean recurring is just a little bit more specific than like, you know, and they're kind of just saying like the
Like you
regularity, like
can
it's very,
describe them as recurring, but
Yeah, you can.
unvarying makes more sense.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's more just saying it's not like, oh, you see a skyscraper and then it recurs and it again and again. Like it's more like, you know, there's a skyscraper and then there's a skyscraper that looks just like
Yeah.
it and, you know, all over. So I mean, recurring is close, but unvarying is a better answer. Um, so let's look at
I actually didn't even
17.
get to finish this section because
That,
some of the other things took so long. I think I left a question or two out at the end.
yeah, I mean, again, I think this passage is pretty hard, and you know these you know, I mean, because there's one. I hope we get to it. I'll make sure, but one of these tests is a really hard passage about like you know, Native Americans and like, you know, the kind of like the you know, kind of the way they're perceived and stuff. But it's a
Right.
very difficult passage. So I don't know, just somehow these types of passages can kind of sneak in the most like information and abstract ideas and everything. So pay attention to these passages. And if you see one on your test, kind of leave enough time to like, you know, leave more time than you normally would. Okay, so um, let's look at number 17, lines 4 to 8. So raindrops pounded the hard streets, captured the dim silver glow of street lamps, bounced against sidewalks and glistening sparks, then disappeared like tiny ephemeral jewels into the darkness.
That's B.
Yeah, so I mean, did anyone feel like they want to pick like E maybe? Or yeah, because it's like abstractly kind of like talking about the raindrops and stuff. I mean, so that one's close. But it's just that more than talking abstractly about the raindrops, they're, you know, really you know, they're really just describing vividly like, oh, the raindrops, and they're, you know, catching the dim glow and they're bouncing and they're glistening and stuff. So it's more just being very vivid. Um, let's look at number, and we could do number 18. Let's look at number 18. So in lines 8 to 9, they're basically saying, Mommy and Tata teased that I was disillusioned because the streets were not paved with gold. So, I mean, those two people imply the narrator, you know, I mean, wasn't ruled by greedy impulses, right? Um, or, you know, believed in miraculous transformations. It's just kind of out too. So the answer is harbored unrealistic expectations, right? Like she believed that it's going to be really like, you know, exciting and just, you know, amazing. Okay, so I don't know. Did you guys get like 18, 19, and like 20 right about? I mean, I want to go over 20 actually. So let's just skip to that unless anyone was worried about 19. Okay. So let's go to 20. So I mean, this kind of interaction with this girl is kind of, big part of the
Yeah, I did not
passage.
get 20 right.
Okay. So I mean, so basically, at the very beginning, like if it's asking, make note that it's saying which of the following best describes the initial interaction of the girl and the narrator. So it's not just saying, oh, like what was the interaction, but what was the initial interaction. So, if we look at number, like lines like 23 or 24 about, a girl came out of the building next door, a jump rope in her hand. She appraised me shyly. I pretended to ignore her. She stepped on the rope, stretched the ends overhead as if to measure their length, and then began to skip slowly, grunting each time she came down on the sidewalk. Okay, then they kind of explained that. She turned her back to me. She faced me again and smiled. I smiled back, and she hopped over. And then she talks in Spanish, and then they start talking, right? So in the initial interaction, like, do you feel like they wanted to meet each other? Or were they kind
I
of?
feel like the one girl kind of wanted to reach out, but the other one was
Yeah,
like,
I mean, which one did
rude.
which one did you feel wanted to reach
The one
out?
with the jump rope.
Yeah, so I mean, she kind of like looked right because I mean, the girl with the jump
It
rope kind
says
of
I
looked at her
pretended to
and
ignore her.
right. So,
Right, but it's
polite.
not like the girl with the jump rope went over and say, hi.
Right.
yeah, so I mean, they're both kind
What
of
does appraise
cautious.
mean again? Like
Kind of,
notice
judge and look
almost?
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, like you can almost think of like appraise a painting, right, for a
Right.
certain value. So it's kind of like, making a judgment. Okay, so yeah, so I mean, the answer is E. But I mean, like A is close. Neither was in the mood to meet someone new, right? But
Well,
again,
that's actually funny because I crossed that out
oh,
immediately.
okay, okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, if you see that as wrong and it is wrong, that's fine. But I mean, I think A is somewhat close. But I mean, I guess as Tommy, you were saying, right, that like basically, like the little girl with the jump rope sort of like, almost wants to meet her, right?
Right.
Like it's kind of, or I don't know, Robbie, were you saying that? Someone was saying that. Basically like, yeah, like the little, the girl with the jump rope kind of like was wanted to meet her. So neither was in the mood. Well, maybe the narrator wasn't in the mood to meet someone new, but the little girl seemed to be in the mood.
The answer was E on this one.
Yeah, the answer was E.
It's
So I
funny
mean,
now that I look back at it, makes perfect sense.
yeah,
At the
exactly.
time, I was like, go,
Hindsight
go,
is
go.
pretty funny.
Yeah. So I mean, B, C, and D are pretty, they study each other suspiciously. They act as if they already knew each other. No, because then they would have just gone, hey, what's up? What's going on, right? Okay, so let's look at 21. So, I mean, they're interchanged. Did anybody kind of, what do you feel was the main idea of their, like, interchange? They're saying, okay, I'm Puerto Rican, same thing, Puerto Rican, comma, Hispanic, that's why we're here. And then, if you're Puerto Rican, they call, and they call you Hispanic, like, what's the deal with that? So, I mean, they're kind of just discussing, like, Hispanic versus Puerto Rican for a while. So, so then, what do you think that's best described as? Yes, I mean, attempt to identify the criteria that determine an ethnic label, and especially we see that because they're saying like, the girl with the jump rope says like, the main narrator says, "Are you Hispanic?" And the girl with the jump rope says, "Well, it has to do with being from a Spanish country. I mean, you or your parents, even if you don't speak Spanish, you're Hispanic," and so it's kind of like, they are defining what that means. Um, and I mean, B is kind of close, but like the
Yeah, I don't
value
think
of
the
ethnic
value.
labels, like they're not saying like, oh, calling someone Hispanic is, not good or good. I mean, they're not saying anything like that. They're kind of just saying, um, oh, I don't know what it means to be Hispanic. Let's try to find out. Okay, so did anyone, let's see, 22, 23, 24. We've got like 13 minutes left, so maybe let's just skip to the next section unless anyone had trouble with those last few. Okay. So, did anyone have trouble with the vocab, or let's just move to the main passage?
I got 5 wrong.
Okay, sure. So 5 is mainly a vocab thing again. So I mean, basically, Thomas Hardy. Has anyone read Thomas Hardy's novels?
No.
No. Okay, I've read a couple. They're pretty good, but they're kind of strange. Okay. Thomas Hardy's novels are described as blank because of their preoccupation with daily life in rural and agricultural settings.
I had some issue with some of this vocabulary here.
Yeah. So I mean, Does anyone does anyone know what any of these words mean in number
Well, I know
5?
lugubrious means kind of like dreary.
Good. Yeah, and that's a good SAT word, by the way. The lugubrious. They like to use that a lot. So yeah, so know that one. But yeah, so that exactly, it means like really, like, really sad and crying and everything. So it's not that, right?
No.
So we can cross out C. Metaphorical. I mean, maybe, but I mean, metaphorical, would that really describe like
Means you're
rural?
comparing stuff, kind of, right?
Yeah, I mean, or metaphorical. I mean, if it said like, because yeah, exactly, because it describes like the way the family works as like a farm, then that, yeah, then that would be metaphorical. But it's not. It's just saying like preoccupation with daily life in rural and agricultural settings. So, okay, so it's not metaphorical, right? So I mean, bucolic
What does
means,
that mean? I have no
yeah.
idea.
So that does mean like, farm-like and
Oh, okay.
relating to
So
the
that's it,
countryside and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of good to know bucolic. It's also kind of good to know idyllic, because that's almost like a you almost think idyllic, and then that's just a common word that comes up. But you would think
How
that
do you
means like
spell idyllic?
it's IDYLLIC.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that
Idyllic.
word
Yeah, so
before.
I mean, you would think that like it might mean ideal or something, but it actually means like, like rural. So
Okay.
that's just another good one to know. And again, like next time I'll definitely go over some, like common vocab words. So let's look at, yeah, so I mean 6, anybody have trouble with that, or maybe let's just
What
take
was the answer for 6 again?
6. Yeah, 6 is E. Yeah, and let's just look at that really quickly. Some skeptics consider the search for extraterrestrial intelligence to be blank, even foolish. Others go so far as to accuse, set-eyed scientists of outright blank in applying skewed data. So I mean,
Not C and D, because plausible and painstaking.
yeah, I mean,
Different
plausible and
difference.
painstaking, that's not like even foolish, so those are out.
I also
Absurd,
think
misguided.
absurd is like too powerful. It's like absurd. Even
Yeah, if they're
foolish.
gonna say even
That's
foolish, like
Yeah.
absurd is
Think
more
before she
powerful
did.
than
Yeah.
Foolish, even absurd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's very insightful. Yeah, so we can knock out B. So then we're down to A and E: misguided, remonstrance, wrong-headed chicanery. So I mean, it's probably, those two last blanks you probably don't really know. But chicanery means like trickery, so that really fits in with, the scientists are outright like applying trickery and applying skewed data. Okay, so let's move on to the the long passage now. Do you guys feel, with passages, when you have long passages like this and two of
I
them?
just don't like comparing them. Like
I
that gets
know,
annoying.
I know. Nobody likes
I didn't
comparing
read every
them.
single word because I only have 20 minutes to
Yeah.
finish this.
So I mean, yeah. So this is the shorter one, right? Yeah, 20 minutes. Okay. So then this is pretty much a race against the clock. But I mean, one good thing to do is just write, and if you have time, again. But even if you're skimming, just write down like, okay, this is like, this one means this and that one means that. So did you guys get, like, what do you think is the main idea of passage 1 and 2? If you don't know, then I'll tell you. But
Kind of just to
Yeah.
state that comic books like hurt you.
Yeah.
Like, they're bad.
Right, so
Obviously,
right.
passage 1 was more critical than
Yeah.
passage 2
So
was a little,
passage
yeah.
1 was like, they're anti-educational. Passage 2 was like, yeah, they're junk, but they're like a good escape. They're
Right.
fun. Yeah, exactly.
Good
So it's good junk. Yeah. So I mean, so passage. So that's pretty much where we are. So I mean, number 7. Both authors would likely agree that comic books. What do you think is the answer to that? Yeah, so educational value, because they both actually agree on that. Let's look at 9. The author passage 1 criticizes those who would make a sharp distinction, line 11, because the author believes that.
Let's see.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay, good. So you guys are
Yeah.
pretty good at this. So maybe let's skip ahead to
The only
like,
one I had trouble with in this whole passage section was 14.
Okay, so let's look at
Oh,
14.
yeah.
It can be inferred that the author of passage 2 considers attempts at the latter, line 52, to have been. So we look at line 52. It says, they're like junk is junk. There's no uncorrupt junk or moral junk or educational junk. Though attempts at the latter have, from time to time, been foisted upon us. So it's kind of saying people. He's kind of just mentioning this as an aside. It's actually pretty irrelevant to his argument. But he's saying like, oh, well, some people, have tried to say, that there's like educational junk, like, educational like video games or something. So what is he saying? He's saying attempts at the latter have been foisted upon us. So he's not
Is the
saying.
answer D for that?
Yes.
Crap,
So-
I crossed that out and put E in. I had that circle.
So
too.
yeah, it's not. You said it's E.
I put Ian,
Okay, so
but it
it's
should have
not.
been D.
Yeah, so it's not foolish imitation.
I was gonna do E, but I realized like it's not really imitation.
Yeah,
not
that's
really
Right.
I was down
Right.
to D&D and I
Yeah.
did
Right.
D.
So yeah, I mean, look for those
The
words.
reason I
Oh,
put
Is there like, because I know some people have done this. I'm not sure if this is like a good way to do it, but some people I know don't even read it. They just go, they say in lines 18 to 22. Just go right to this line.
I mean, I don't
I
think.
don't read it.
I
I'll
do
just
that when I
I'll just
have
circle
2
the
minutes
part
left.
That it says like line 11. I'll just circle 11 and I'll like read right.
No,
I'll
so
read, like 10 and 12.
You're
in
saying
context.
you don't read the
I
passage
don't
at
read
all.
the passage.
Okay. I mean, if that
Yeah.
from person to person it varies. I mean, I think it's good to read the passage just to get sense. But I mean, I don't know. Are you all of you kind of wasting a lot of time on
I
like,
usually
reading the
just speed
passage?
read them unless I have 2
Yeah, I
minutes.
mean,
I
like
don't
if
even
you
look
can,
at them.
Yeah.
I think the optimal thing is to speed read if you can. Like if you're good at that, I would speed
Because
read
what
them.
kills you if you don't read them is when they say, "What is the meaning of this passage?"
Yeah,
or "What does he
exactly,
mean
like,
by
you-
that?"
I
you
usually
lose
just
the-
save that to the end.
Right.
because By the time I've answered like 5 questions
Right,
on
right,
one
you can-
passage, I've read most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if that
Oh, I see.
strategy.
You kind of read them through the questions because they
so
have
like
you go
through the
back
questions,
and
I
read.
just jump, like,
Yeah, so I
Right.
mean, if that
forward.
strategy works for you, go ahead. But I mean, if you're going to not read them, I'll at least just read the introductory sentences of a few of the paragraphs and the concluding
Yeah,
sentences
if you
of a few
read, at
paragraphs.
least it should be like this. If you read the
the
first
first
and last
sentence,
sentence,
the last
yeah, of
sentence,
every
Yeah.
paragraph, you should
Right.
be able to get the meaning of it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's fine. I mean, if that works for you, that's fine. Again, I think the best thing is to speed read everything, but if you can't speed read or you just want to get started on the questions, if that works for you, just, looking at the questions immediately or looking at the first and last sentences of each paragraph and then going, that's fine too. So, I mean, whatever works for you. But I mean, yeah, if you want to try that, I would, totally support that. I think, I don't, I mean, you say you don't read it at all, and obviously you're getting, you get a lot of them right, but like, I would still say, even if you're not going to read them at all, you might just want to glance at some of the intro and concluding sentences,
Right.
just to really get a
You
feel
guys have
for
a good
it.
point though, where you already read a lot of them through their questions because they're constantly
Mhm.
saying,
so
"Go
you, like,
back
read
and
it
read
twice.
that. Go back
Yeah.
and read that."
First
That's
time, then
true.
go back and answer
That's
all the
true.
questions.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a good idea to speed read it to get, a good idea of just like the whole, idea. But yeah, I mean, if it saves you time and if you like that, sure. That's totally
Right.
fine. Then, if you just want to, like read the questions and go back. I mean, you're saying if you go back to the line, you should read around it though. But you're
Yeah.
saying you do that, so
Yeah,
that's
to
fine.
get context.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We just have a few minutes left. Are there any other like questions people had trouble with on this passage?
I think the last 4 weren't too hard. 15, 16,
Mhm.
17, 18.
Yeah, I mean, like 18, we can all agree compared to the tone of passage 2, passage 1 is more like,
Right.
extreme, right? Yeah, okay, and then,
Even severe doesn't. It's like not the perfect word for the
Yeah.
circumstance,
but it's
but
better than
Yeah.
everything else.
right.
yeah, okay, good. I mean, let's just look at like 16. In line 68 to 87, what victim, so that's over here. So kind of, critics of comic books dismiss the more positive junk. Okay, so passage 2 argues the fantasy world of comic books. What? Yeah, so I mean, they're saying as again, therapeutic. I mean, that works, but I mean, it might, an escape might be a little bit better,
Appears
but
to
they
adults
don't,
who
they don't say
cultivate
that.
childlike
So
wonder.
It's sort of therapeutic because it's saying that they read these and then they can go face the world for another couple days.
yeah,
Right.
no, that's true. No, I mean, it is true, right? They're saying that then they recharge and then psychically renewed, we can return above
But
ground.
after school, everything to get some downtime. In the
Yeah.
comic books.
Yeah, so I mean that's fine. Okay. So I mean you guys didn't have any other problems with, 11, 12, 13 or anything? Number 13 in line 40, they publish mimeographed fanzines, strange little publications deifying what is looked back on the golden age of comic books. And like that's kind of to talk about like a specialized term because like we don't know what fanzines are. That's why the quotation marks are used. Makes sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.